The Montana House has narrowly endorsed a bill to require supermajority votes of the legislature to approve any new taxes or a tax increase. The House voted 53 to 47 on Friday in favor of House Bill 148, which is sponsored by Republican State Representative Forrest Manville of Columbus. If enacted, the bill would require at least a 2/3 majority of both the House and Senate to approve any future tax increase in Montana. All 42 House Democrats and 5 Republicans voted against it. Democrat Zach Brown of Bozeman said in states that have required supermajorities for tax increases, big budget cuts have occurred because it's too difficult to pass taxes needed to fund government services. But Manville said his intent is not to make it impossible to pass a tax or fee increase.
This bill does not prevent tax increases. It doesn't. You could still increase taxes or fees with this bill. What this bill will do is encourage bipartisanship and better policy if we do increase taxes or fees.
In Arizona, the state and local school districts have cut support for K-12 funding by more than 30% since they enacted the supermajority rule. Since Oklahoma's supermajority was put in place in 1992, the divestment has been widespread, including the largest cuts to school funding in the nation.
The bill faces a final House vote on Monday before it can advance to Senate. Despite the current polar vortex gripping the nation, there's a glimmer of good news this Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil could not find his shadow Saturday morning, and as the legend goes, this means we're in for an early spring. According to legend, if Phil sees a shadow, there will be 6 more weeks of winter weather. If he does not see his shadow, spring will come early. The temperatures in town of Punxsutawney, about 80 miles northeast of Pittsburgh, was anything but spring. Like as Phil emerged from his den, crowds braved single-digit temperatures for hours to get a groundhog glimpse. Punxsutawney Phil has been in charge of telling us how long winter will wear on since 1887. In 2018, Phil saw a shadow, which led to 6 more weeks of winter. Last year, well, welcoming back a familiar face, and joining me at the decks now is Rob Griggs, and he says early spring. Today the weather's pretty nice, but is that changing?
I poked out of my hole, Zoe, and I looked around, and I've got my own opinions on shadows and everything else, but I think an early spring would be kind of nice. Speaking of Punxsutawney Phil, I got a cute little graphic here for you. If you missed this, of course, he saw no shadow. That means early spring, as Zoe pointed out. But what I want to point out to you is the fact that Punxsutawney Phil has been wrong 69% of the time. I wouldn't let that psych you out too bad. And we are in for a very, very cold stretch of weather. If you take a look at this, that's not ink falling into water. That's cold polar air slipping down from the polar region, not Arctic. We're talking polar cold temperatures taking effect, and they'll stay with us all the way through mid next week. So we've got some big weather to talk about, super cold temperatures, some snow on the way, all of that with a complete forecast coming up in just a little bit. Zoe?
Thanks, Rob. Well, Meat in Montana is something our treasure state is known for, and today the Veterans Meat Locker event gave back to local veterans. The meat, deer, elk, moose, beef, and pork. Hunters donate big game, and ranchers contribute beef and pork. Messiah Lutheran Church also served a meal, and the West End Exchange Club gave veterans winter clothing. 4th Avenue Meats did all of the processing at a discounted rate, and the Billings based group gave a total of about 1,500 pounds of meat to veterans today.
I get to see the spouses, I get to see the grandchildren, I get to see everybody involved, and I get to be the one to personally shake their hand and thank them for their service. A lot of veterans gave up hunting, but they just never forgot that they like to taste of venison, elk, anything else, and this is a good treat. So this is something that they don't do anymore, but we can still provide that flavor for them.
In just 2 years, the Montana Veterans Meat Locker has given away about 31,000 pounds of meat to 3,000 veterans. It's estimated that more than 400,000 people visit the Billings Public Library every year, and today is the 5th anniversary of the $20 million, 66,000 square foot building's opening. A culmination of a week of celebrating today, a scavenger hunt, and book sale were among the events, allowing the public to learn more about the library. Library opened January 6th and was dedicated on February 1st, 2014.
This library is used, it's loved, and is a critical part of our community. I can't believe that 5 years have gone so quickly. Truly, we built it and they have come. How many people have used it and enjoy it and look forward to what's going to happen next in the library?
The Billings Public Library has received the Leadership in Energy and Environment Design Platinum Award, and the American Institute of Architects and American Library Association chose the building as among the best designed in North America. As with any sport, rock climbing involves a special combination of athleticism, focus, and strategy. Steep World in Billings is hosting the Montana Bouldering Championships today. About 100 competitors from Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, North Dakota, and North Carolina are there. All of the climbs are done without ropes on the lower, shorter course with high difficulty.
That's what's one of the funnest things about climbing is you have this, problem in front of you. It's definitely pulling a lot with your arms, but it's also a lot of technique to balancing and trying to keep your core tight and being able to technically work through the moves, not just pull with your arms. It's incredible when you kind of start to break through to higher grades and whatnot.
The finals of the Montana Bouldering Championships start at 6 at Steep World, and there is a $10 admission charge. It was 30 years ago today that an explosion rocked the capital city. Early in the morning on February 2nd, 1989, a runaway train hit a helper set, causing 19 train cars to derail. MTN's Tim McGonigal spoke with one man who was there that day.
Amazingly, no one was seriously injured during the train crash and explosion 30 years ago. But for one hell of a man, he cheated death 4 times on that bone-chilling morning. Mike McNellis was working on a helper set that day and was on the track trying to make the switch by hand when a runaway train from Austin came roaring straight for him. He managed to jump out of the way and run for his life.
I ran off the track to the north, and then I looked back and I could hear all the cars derailing right behind me, so I said to myself, don't stop running or your wife's going to be a widow. So
the worst was far from over. Tune in tonight at 10 to hear Mike's story of survival after one of the derailed train cars exploded. Reporting in the studio, Tim McGonigal, MTN News. Back to you.
Thanks, Tim. Well, Q2 is your home for Super Bowl 53. CBS Sports kicks things off Sunday morning at 9:30, and the pregame festivities continue until the game at 4. Following the game, check out the premiere of The World's Best. Then join us all for your local news, weather, and sports during the 10 o'clock news. And during our local news, you will not want to miss our special Super Bowl assignments. MTN's Elizabeth Copeland takes us inside ADF International in Great Falls. The business creates steel pieces to fit into projects that are like large-scale puzzles. One of their most recently completed projects, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, home to Super Bowl 53. Find out how steel put together right here in Montana made its way to the biggest sporting event of the year. And if you've spent any amount of time in Montana, there's a good chance you know of Tillman Motor Company or Tillman Equipment Company. Born and raised on a ranch near Chinook, Mike Tillman grew up like most Montana kids during the 40s and 50s, working hard, just trying to keep his family trying to help his family make ends meet. But from humble beginnings, Mike Tillman went on to play 12 seasons as a defensive tackle in the NFL. Following his football career, Tillman decided to return to the state he calls home, raising his family on the High Line. On Sunday after the big game, the Montana Ag Network will have Tillman's full story from growing up on a Montana ranch to his time in the NFL and his career after football. Well, thanks for watching the 5:30 news. After the break, meet a 13-year-old boy who was inspired by one song and is now using that inspiration to help others his age around the country. And later in sports, the Cats and Grizz renew their rivalry on the court. Matinee highlights from Bozeman coming up.
You're watching MTN News with Zoe Zandora, Storm Tracker Weather with Connor Pregetzer, and Sports with Casey Conlon. This is the 5:30 news on Q2, Montana's news leader.